Hello, my name is Neil Leach. I'm one of the instigators of the Digital Futures project, along with Philip Yuan. And I'd like to welcome you to our special session on female designers from the Arab world. Before I say anything, I just want to make a point of announcement. That is to say that this weekend, in fact tonight, the clocks change in the United States, which will mean that from next week we will be starting in the States 1 hour later. That is to say 10 o'clock East Coast, 7 o'clock West Coast. But the starting time will remain the same for everyone else around the world. It will still start at 10 o'clock in the evening in China and 3 p.m. in Central Europe. So today is a really very special session for me personally anyway. It really gives us a chance to look at the emerging designers coming out of the Arab world. And as somebody who was brought up in the UK, I have to say that my background was highly influenced by a female designer from the Arab world. In other words, Zaha Hadid. Not only was she an exquisite designer who saved us from the worst excesses of postmodernism, but she was a wonderful icon, not just for female architects, but also for architects from the region, from the Arab world. Today, Shameen Youssef is going to be introducing us, will be hosting chairing this panel. And Shameen herself is from Iraq also. And it's not as though we're looking for the next Zaha Hadid. It's not as though we're looking for someone else who's going to be exactly like that. But rather, this is really a kind of celebration of diversity and the possibility of seeing, of reaching out to across the world. This is in the ethos of Digital Futures. We're concerned to connect the whole world, to overcome boundaries, divisions between races, nations, creeds, beliefs, everything, gender, and to establish a platform that is equal for all. It's part of our ethos also to make this completely free. And we're also interested in overcoming some of those boundaries, the hurdles that are there. The idea that somehow the West is the center and the rest is the West is the center and the rest is the periphery. We want to make a kind of global network that respects all regions. We're interested also in the gender divide, in celebrating the enormous amount of female talent we have in the world today. And we've also been trying to, in our previous sessions, reach out to find out what's going on in particular regions. We had a session previously from Bangladesh. We had a session from Egypt. And we're particularly concerned about environmental issues, about the destruction of, for example, of the Amazon rainforest. We're doing a session on sea level rise in a few weeks' time. So this is, to my mind, the perfect session. Being able to bring together all this talent and to be able to celebrate this kind of diversity in the architectural arena. So I'd like to introduce our host, our chair today, Shameen Youssef. I'll say a few words about Shameen and I'll leave Shameen to introduce our other speakers. Shameen is, as I mentioned, is originally from Iraq. I came across her in Dessau, in Germany, where she was a student, and I understand today there's a big following watching today from Dessau. She went on to Texas A&M to take a PhD, and now is a colleague in Southern California at the Florida Atlantic University, along with Daniel Bolajan and Manas Femiso. So it's a great pleasure to be able to welcome Shameen and to see her move from being a student to becoming a professor, and to be able to host this panel, which is a very important panel for us. So welcome, Shameen. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Neil. And I'm honored, and it's my pleasure today to put this session together, the panelists together. And I really thank Neil for the opportunity for this initiative, the Digital Future Sessions. And the session today is part of this Local Voices sessions. And as Neil mentioned, I think they're very fascinating sessions. And the theme for today's session, the female designers from the other world, from the Arab world, sorry. Why is this theme important? Because I think it's important. I have to introduce the session. So over the last 2 decades, especially after the revolutionary changes brought by the Arab Spring, Arab feminists have challenged prior conditions, signaling a wave of major societal and political change and leading the socio-cultural transformation. A positive consequence is that more female computational designers and architects are emerging in the region. The session recognizes some of those female intellectual computational designers and researchers from the Arab world who are changing the ecology of the built environment. Their work has spawned from pioneering writings on computational design, radical design thinking and practice, to intellectual influence and global impact. The session focuses on the challenges and the future potentials of women's presence in architecture in general and in the field of computational design, in particular in the Arab region. And importantly, our speakers share their state-of-the-art research experience, shedding light on their roles in the recent game-changing feminist wave and their speculation about the consequential change ahead in the built environment. Overall, as a theme, we also have 2 lines of research. So within the session, we have the computational design research in terms of development and documentation, which is represented by our first speaker, Raja Isa, and her important role in establishing computational design pedagogy with her books, with her tutorials and open source references on algorithmic methods, and pioneering this wave, or what we call the democratization wave of access to computational design knowledge. On the other line, we have the rest of the speakers, Aya, Jumana, and Miriam, representing this application of these computational methods. And with their explorative and experimental research, using those cutting-edge computational methods and employing those methods into areas of agent-based modeling, self-organizing systems, responsive and emotive structures, and latest development and research in robotics and fabrication, as we will see in their presentations. I also want to introduce my co-moderator, Professor Nasreen Mansour, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Architecture at South Dakota State University. She has a PhD in architecture from Texas A&M University, and she's a research fellow at Princeton. And then she's also interested in computational design and research, and she's been focusing on this intersection of architecture, religion, and media. Her research encompasses sacred architecture, lighting design, computation, communication, and mass media, religious studies, and psychology. And she applied empirical and theoretical studies for sacred architecture with virtual and augmented reality. And with that, I'm honored to present our first speaker. Our first speaker is Raja Isa from Robert McNeill. And to give a simple introduction to Raja, Raja is a member of Robert McNeill and Associates development team with a special interest in architectural geometry, parametric design, and surface rationalization. She developed a number of specialized plugins, such as paneling tools for Rhino and Grasshopper. She's actively involved in education and has developed the core curriculum of computational design at New School of Architecture and Design in San Diego. She authored a number of books, including The Essential Mathematics for Computational Design, Essential Algorithms and Data Structures in Grasshopper. She holds a bachelor's degree in architectural engineering from University of Baghdad and graduate degrees from Auckland University and the University of Texas. She lives and her family in San Diego. And as a short abstract to her presentation will highlight the importance of the designer community involvement to develop an ecosystem of digital tools that are both inclusive and unique, a design environment with which everyone can express their individuality and invite the world around them. So with that, I would like to welcome Raja, and Raja, the platform is yours now.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. What a wonderful opportunity to be present with you all this day in this conference. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of celebrating the professional women that came from the Arab world. I think I hold the coolest job out there. I actually build cool tools for architectural design and surface rationalization and meet amazing people along the way. They inspire me every day. They keep me going. And as you probably already know, and thank you, Sharmeen, for the introduction as well. I studied in 3 different countries at 3 different corners of the world. And, you know, just the economic and political situations, plus my personal ambition to push myself and my knowledge and my involvement in the field just took me all the way over a period of about 3 decades now. And I worked very briefly as a designer in Jordan, and after that I moved to New Zealand, where I did my graduate degree in architecture, and this is where my fascination in the new technologies that were emerging at the time, and we are talking the late 1990s, and mostly dominated by you know, CAD applications. And from there, I continued to focus and be interested in the use of technology in architectural design, especially in the creative design process. I quickly moved from design realm to the development realm around 2000, where I started my graduate degree in computer science and education. Keep in mind at the time there wasn't the word computational design wasn't there even. And the only route to go and get education in computation was to actually take a professional degree in computer science, which I did, and I think it was a great enrichment and a new way of thinking, and but quite a bit of unnecessary pain that many of you don't have to go through right now because of the availability of programs and resources that feels like it's exploded all around the world in our profession. Research and publishing came hand in hand in my effort the past 20 years, but I specifically around 10 years ago thought that access to computational design thinking was an important barrier to a lot of designers coming into the field. And just using my experience over the years and all the steps that I had to go through, that I felt not everybody has to, is what is the question in my mind was how to guide the designers to make that transition with the minimum amount of pain. You know, the books, if you take a calculus book, it's a huge, but you really need a small part of it to be effective computational designer. The same is true with algorithms and data structure and scripting. So I started to kind of filter through all the material and try to come up with a concise amount of material that people would basically need. And this is when, around the same time I was living in San Diego, I was invited by New School of Architecture and Design to start a new computational design program, which turned into a full year series of courses that from it I was able to produce all the publications and the essential series that is available for free for everyone. And it was tested in a classroom, it was taught, and this is how I became confident that this would be useful for people to use. And indeed, a lot of people use it and find it useful. I'm grateful for being able to share that material. You know, my early research interest is during the late 1990s was in the creative expression of materials in design using the commercial software application commonly available at the time. Most applications were not developed by designers, and the main focus was solving the tedious problem of drawing and documentation, as you all know. There was a clear lack of empathy that I picked on, and a clear lack of understanding of the creative process, and showed in all the products. Very early on, I was convinced that architects and designers are uniquely equipped to create their own tools, and that prompted my research interest that followed since then. You know, building tools for creative designers is both a challenging endeavor, but it's a great joy. Only designers can truly appreciate the demands of creative thinking and how design media and tools can influence the intuition and decision making. Designing digital tools to embrace uncertainty requires a great deal of empathy to the creative design process from one side, but also demands fluency about the boundaries of the digital realm from the other. That's what makes it a uniquely challenging task. So walking that line throughout my career made for a very exciting and rewarding personal journey. As you could see, I mean, let me just go back to the back slide. You can see that moving away from my early interest in materiality in early CAD, where I did a full review of what was available in terms of software applications, but also in terms of research that was emerging, which in the field there. My research narrowed the focus on cellular pattern generation during concept stage of design. That's particularly what I was interested in. I studied the reflective nature of creative design and used my newly acquired skills in programming to implement a prototype using shapegrammars. The work was experimental and was not very intuitive to use, of course, but it was my very first attempt to build a tool. That was about 20 years ago, where there was no access to any computation or any integration in terms of computational design with the application that was available. So here, when I joined McNeil, I extended my research to take advantage of the OpenNURBS technology and the amazing community of Rhino users. I really was fortunate to find an intuitive modeling and development environment backed by a very robust geometry engine and talented community of designers and end users. It really made it possible to test new ideas quickly. This started my career as software developer, and that was the better part of 20 years ago, and it's been just a tremendous journey. So I just want to talk a little bit here about the publishing, which I consider to be an important part of what we do here, to be able to transfer knowledge to the new generation. New ideas keep emerging all the time, and we are only just one element in a whole picture of all these wonderful people that are putting their energy and knowledge and effort into this emerging field. And you know, my publications obviously started with my graduate study thesis, but I quickly started collaborating, you know, the early days of Grasshopper with Andrew Payne, and he put together the very first Grasshopper primer and wanted to add a scripting part of it, or chapter, and this is where I came in and I wrote that in. And over the years since I started to put my everything I learned in a publication that is open source and accessible to everyone, because in my mind, the more people know about how to cross that barrier of entry to that field, the more wonderful energy we will be able to harness in here. And this is what prompted the series of the publications that followed. And so a very important part of what I think I did, and I always had interest in education, is when I had the opportunity to join a new school of architecture and design for about 3 years, where I solely was focused on developing a curriculum to teach computational design. The idea, my idea was from interacting with designers, trying to make that shift to computational design at the time, is the lack of knowledge base, understanding of a few basic concepts that actually hinder their ability to make progress. And really sometimes they give up and move on to a different kind of focus. So I thought that the architectural education at the time, and I think is changing every day since, lacked the rigor in terms of teaching the principles and the base knowledge of computational design that is necessary really to be able to be computational designer, because computational design has two parts to it. You know, you need to be a creative designer, and there is these creative urges, but there is the discipline and the structure of computers and computation. And if you bypass the learning of the basic mathematics, basic understanding of algorithms, of what data structure mean, how it organize the information and data, and how you can manipulate it, basic knowledge of scripting even, and logical thinking. All these are very necessary. And from my study in computer science, of course, this is something that they teach extensively. And initially, I struggled because it was a shift, a really big shift between designer thinking, intuitive thinking, the ability to internalize information and then express it in design form, design a flow, and all the wonderful things that designers do using their intuition. But if they don't know how to hold the pencil, they really cannot sketch. And the situation that I found myself in, and perhaps I assumed others did, is that although I was a very capable designer and I had a great intuition about design, the ability to shift my thinking into a logical mode took a bit of effort to start with. But after that, it infused very naturally with my creative thinking. So that barrier to me was not well served in architectural education, and not really emphasized as courses. And I mean, the work is outsourced to the students to do their own learning. And the only way to combat that was, in my mind, to make all the courses available online for free for everybody to access. And this way, everybody will be able to access that knowledge. And so I developed these series of courses that cover that, help you transition from basic knowledge with the essential mathematics for computational design, with the essential algorithms and data structures, into digital fabrication, where you transition between the digital and the physical, and then finally to be able to use computers to simulate and optimize your designs. Once you go through that process, then you'll be very capable to incorporate computation as part of your design process. So I continued since to post, courses and online through short tutorials and videos, and I continue to do that. I'm also working right now on a manual about Rhino modeling in architecture that should be coming soon. My last stop here is that just to draw a parallel between the process of designing computational tools and the process of design itself. For example, when I first started the paneling tools project, I really had two goals in mind. The first was to support a quick mock-up of paneling ideas, and the second was to be able to prototype the paneling concept, making a smoother transition from design to fabrication. So just like any design project, at first I had no clear idea about the specific flow and functionality of the tool itself. I only had a concept of a tool that was itself uncertain. So I decided to use a reflective methodology to create it. It meant that I needed to involve the end users very early in the design process. So paneling tools development followed a path very similar to that of any other creative design project. It starts with a problem to solve, synthesize a concept prototype, share with the user for reflection and feedback, and go through that cycle multiple times until you have a product that you think is useful to share with others. The last thing I want to say here is that there is a great overlap between tool development and architectural design. They even use the same terminology. They do an architecture. They design the flow. They have a function to serve. They really care about the user experience, and there is a lifetime maintenance of the product. So in the end, although I feel like I chose a special focus in my career, I never stepped away from being designer at heart, and this is what makes it extremely enjoyable. The last thing I'd like to share with you is, one place that I have my here. So the essential mathematics, I know a text format is not useful for designers, so I actually started to create a series of short videos to explain all the concepts, and it's shared with the community in the Rhino YouTube channel. And I have my own channel as well, where I'm putting videos about the use of paneling tools and modeling with Rhino. And this is just a small effort to help out and hopefully be able to pass my knowledge to the new generation. And I'm grateful for your time and for your listening in, and I hope to continue to connect with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raja. I have to say this is an amazing opportunity to all of us, I think, to meet you virtually. I know we met in person, but I think for everyone, this is a great opportunity because we all learned from your books and from your tutorials. And it was wonderful to have you present on this journey. Thank you so much. I have so many questions, but I will hold on my questions and I will move on to present our next speaker. And our next speaker is Miriam Al-Jumeiri. Miriam is a Bahraini architect and researcher with interest in novel fabrication techniques, computational design, and material systems. She's currently a graduate fellow at MIT, pursuing her, I think, Master of Architecture. I think it's a Master of Science in Architecture, yes, computational program. In 2017, she received a Bachelor of Architecture from the American University of Sharjah, UAE, and in 2018, she was awarded as a Fulbright Scholar at the University of Michigan. She acquired professional experience in New York at Diller Scofodio, and in Bahrain at Studio Annie Holtrop. To also give a few statements on her presentation. So Miriam will present and introduce her work, covering several research projects that she has done at both University of Michigan and American University of Sharjah, and also the third university, which is MIT, and her most recent research in MIT. The work showcases and highlights the importance of cross-disciplinary pedagogy and the emergence of new generation of hybrid designers. With that, I would welcome Miriam. And Miriam, thank you so much. And the platform is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Shanmin, for the introduction. Sharing the screen. All right. Can you see my screen? Awesome. Perfect. All right. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be on this panel with the incredible women, especially with Raja. She's like part of my learning journey into computation. So it's incredible to have her on this panel, and I'm kind of starstruck as well. All right. So this is kind of the timeline of, I would say, my academic and professional journey. I started my Bachelor's of Architecture at the American University of Sharjah, and I graduated there in 2017. And then I moved back to Bahrain, where I worked for a bit at Studio Annie Holtrop. And then afterwards, I switched to Michigan, where I joined the Digital Materials Technologies program in Ann Arbor. Afterwards, I worked for about a year in New York at Diller Scofodio, and then jumped into the computation program at MIT. So it's kind of like moving back and forth between academia and professional practice. And I would like to give somewhat of a snapshot of what I've been doing in different schools and kind of amplify or highlight, the shift of interest and the shift of trajectories that I've had and how each one of these schools have influenced me in my current research. So this is kind of a snapshot of what I was doing at the American University of Sharjah. It was about a 5-year program. And at the time, I was very much interested in the whole idea of materiality and exploring different materials through my architectural projects in studio. Although after graduating and taking some time to reflect and professionally practicing, it leaves time to kind of critique some of the work that you were doing. And one thing that I would say that I was slightly unhappy with my approach was I was using materials and materiality as a means of communicating larger architectural ideas and these spatial qualities, as opposed to actually understanding the material behavior and working closely with them. And so that kind of influenced me in joining the Digital Materials Technologies group at the University of Michigan about a year later, where I had the opportunity to work more closely with materials on a one-to-one scale and really understand the material behaviors. And this kind of gives you a snapshot of what I was working there at the time. It's a 9-month intensive program, and I would say it's kind of at the nexus of like a little bit of material science, a little bit of computation, architectural design, and a whole lot of just trial and error and research. And I'll be highlighting one project in particular which is called Neocrates. Basically, it's CNC knits for programmable hybrid formworks, which I was working on with fellow colleagues Sam and Misri. And before diving into the actual project, I thought it might be relevant to preface how I came about the technology, since I would say it's somewhat of a niche topic within the architectural context, and it's not widely used or accessible due to the steep learning curve, and then also the cost that it comes with the use of knitting machines. So I had the opportunity to take a class that was taught by Sean Alquist, and if you know anything about textiles or CNC knitting, you know that Sean Alquist is the knitting guru within the United States. And so this project in particular, I just happened to be within the CNC knitting group, randomly selected, just happened to be there. And I fell in love with the whole process, and it was very exciting to me. And the project sparked interest specifically in textiles and CNC knitting in particular. And it got me thinking, what are some of the applications of knitted textiles in building technology and within an architectural context in which they would have more of a permanent and durable presence as opposed to a more temporary and transient presence, which is what the installation that we were working on. So we did a little bit of digging, looking at the history of textiles production and the mechanization of textiles and automations in that route. And the first noted machine that was created to automate textile manufacture was by William Lee in the late 1500s. And it was only about 300 years later that it made its way through architectural applications. At the time, it was mostly being used to produce carpets and clothing items, but in the 1500s, there wasn't really any applications within an architectural context. But in the late 1800s, Gustav Lilienthal, this is one of the first documented patents of using fabric and textiles as formwork for concrete in an architectural application where it was used in the manufacture of a floor slab. And then about 100, or not 100 years later, but like in the early 1900s, it was used by James Weller for the production of a column or walls. So there are multiple applications. So having that kind of history in mind, some of the questions that came up would, okay, what would that look like today? What some of these applications could look like today with the advent of CNC knitting machines? And how would that affect some of the architectural applications? And so maybe just a little bit of a technical detail here. The machine that we were working with was a flat bed CNC machine. And so you would have the front needle bed and the back needle bed. And so that gives you the opportunity to knit 2 layers of textiles together, but then also have the ability to seam them. And so the diagram, I don't know if you can see my mouse here, but within this diagram, you can see like 1 layer of the textile and then the back layer and then the blue stitches seaming them together. And so that gives you the opportunity to create pockets and seams. And that's what we ended up doing. We created these knits that had several pockets in which we could insert inflatables and inflate them. And these are a couple of images. And you can see here, this would be like the top layer. And then on the back side, you'd have the back layer. And then this is the connecting seam. A few more additional images. And so we were using the knitted textile as somewhat of a formwork to cast in glass fiber reinforced concrete. And we were very much interested in the material dialogue between the formwork and the concrete, and specifically the textiles as somewhat of a driving agent of control of form finding. So we're looking into programmable textiles and programming internal structures at a microscale for global and local implications of control of the overall form. And yeah, these are a couple of images that showcase the casted concrete. This was the very first successful cast. All you have to do is, wait a couple of hours and then peel off the textile, and you'd have all these impressions and imprints, even the smallest of details of like being able to tell what even stitch structure you were using, which is very beautiful, I think. Again, another couple of images. And so after doing those first series of tests, we were looking into creating somewhat of a stitch grammar catalog that we can use and combine together to create like a higher form of control. And so if you can see here at the top, you have the different stitch types that you can use when knitting, such as a stitch, which is a single jersey, a tuck, float, and cast off. And these are some of the icons which combines them together. And this showcases what in reality it would actually look like if you were to use such an icon. And with the programming that we were looking into, we were also interested in somewhat of programmed inflation. Can we influence the textile and inflatable so that there would be like a single direction inflation versus bidirectional? And as you can see here in the diagram, can you simulate or influence that inflation in a specific direction just by virtue of using specific stitch lengths on one side and specific stitch structures on the other? And we were also and these are a couple of examples of some of the tests that we were running. And we were also interested in programmed slumping. And so we looked into symmetrical slumping and how we can somewhat control the depth of the cavities and the overall depth of the concrete slab. And those are the three panels that we were looking into, which was kind of successful. And after doing those series of tests, we were interested of, can we combine multiple stitch types and stitch structures to achieve some kind of an asymmetrical slumping? And so this is a simulation of what that would look like. And we knitted, and these are further images of some of the simulations that we ran, predicting some of the slumping. And these are some of the outputs of the asymmetrical slumping. Those three look into depth control, and then the next three look at integrating some kind of a patterning within the asymmetrical and symmetrical slumping. So once we did those series of studies, which were somewhat successful, of moving from having the stitch structure grammar and then moving from the knitted textile and then trying to predict what the output would be once you have the weight of concrete and the gravity. We were interested in moving to something that was a little bit at a larger scale and challenging what we had done earlier. And this was a simulation predicting of how can we achieve somewhat of a shell structure that had a double slump using specific stitch structures. And so we had no idea if this was going to work. And there was also like a lot of hesitation of this will definitely not work. But somehow after we've knitted it and applied the concrete, we've got the double slump structure, which was somewhat of a proof of concept of the whole workflow that we had developed with the knitted textiles. And this was one of the tests where we were integrating double slumped curvatures as well as patterning. And although I'm showing like all the successful images, I think it's super important to highlight some of the failures, which often we do not do. But this is an important learning process for us, which was very pivotal in helping us reach some of the outputs that we got. And honestly, this was, I would say, about like 85% of the whole process. It was about a 3-month project, and I would say it was only during the last 3 weeks that it somehow we finally got everything to work with the concrete mix and the textiles, just to avoid any of the cracking. And to end this project, I'll be sharing a video of the whole process just to get an idea. So here you can see we're peeling off the textile once the concrete has cured. And here we were scanning some of the concrete panels. We didn't get too far with this part of the project, but the interest was to create some kind of a comparative analysis of the simulations that we had generated and the casts and try to compare how closely our predictions were. This was the double slump. This was the assembly of the panels. Okay, and oops, moving on to the next. With the current research, I won't be talking too much about that, but currently at MIT, my main focus is looking at machine making, in particular CNC machines, and this is what I've been working on the past week, getting into electronic design, PCB making, and motor design as well. I think part of the interest of why there's like this shift into or like an interest into machine making, especially with the pandemic and what's currently going on. There's limited access to fab labs, and not everybody would have the privilege of as well access to all of the machines that we have, and that is kind of reserved to elite institutions. So part of the interest is to domesticate and democratize access to fabrication machines and make them a little bit more accessible and affordable to the public. So this is kind of my current interest and what I'm currently working on. Didn't get too far with it yet, but thought it would be interesting to share. And that's all the content that I have for you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Miriam. Thank you for the great presentation. I enjoy your videos and your kind of line of like from computational tools to fabrication and all of the processes that you presented. Thank you so much. I will also have many questions for you, but we have to move on with our third presentation. For the third presentation, we have two presenters, Aya Riyad and Jumana Abdul Khalik. So I would like to present Aya first. So to give you an overview on Aya's bio, Aya is the co-founder and chief architect of Shift and Space Design and Research Practice. And she's a tutor of advanced computational design at the American University in Cairo. She has a master's degree, MArch, from the Design Research Lab from the AA School of Architecture in London. And her experimental work is at the intersection of architecture, robotics, emergent technologies, and art. She's particularly interested in interactive, experiential design that is human-centric. She's also passionate about blurring the lines between the physical and the digital world and the seamless integration between hardware and software. With Aya, we will have also Jumana Abdul Khalik, and Jumana Abdul Khalik is a multi-skilled experimental architect, design researcher, and entrepreneur with an MArch degree from the Design Research Lab, also from AA London. And she's particularly interested in computational design, mimicking synthetic biological complex systems and behaviors through different additive manufacturing techniques, robotics, and artificial intelligence. She's committed to utilizing both her professional and practical experience to allow architecture and design to communicate and enhance the quality of life, and hopes to achieve her vision through the Shift and Space Design and Research Practice. The studio she recently co-founded with Aya. In their presentation, they will actually first present their master's research project at the AA London, which is the Slinky Bot. And the Slinky Bot is a behavioral, autonomous, self-assembling design robotic system. It aims to provide an alternative approach for living that extends on the ideas of materially and geometrically elastic, endless, and ever-evolving architecture. They have recently also founded this shift and space design and research practice, and they will also discuss one of their studio's projects, Plush, a pavilion offering visitors a unique interactive design experience and a glimpse of a world of endless possibilities for a sustainable future. With that, I would like to welcome Aya and Jumana. Thank you so much. And the platform is yours. And yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Sharmeen, for this introduction. First of all, we'd like to say that we're thrilled to be here today alongside inspiring Arab female computational designers. So thank you, Sharmeen, for bringing us together. Today, our presentation title is Redefining Spatial Experiences Through Emergent Technologies. But first, I'd like to introduce Aya and I. We're both computational designers and design researchers, and we kind of share a very similar background. We both graduated, we're both Egyptian architects, and we graduated from the American University in Cairo, in Egypt. And and then later on, we moved. Actually, our program was heavily rooted in socio-cultural and heritage aspects during our studies in Cairo. And later on, but we were always very inspired by computational design, and we were so curious about the emergent technologies and generative design. So we later on moved to the DRL, where we actually met each other there and became friends through like our shared design vision. We focused there on generative design and technologies and robotics and artificial intelligence in the realm of architecture and design. And fast forward to 2020, we realized that there's a gap in the region in terms of these progressive ideas and their design application. So, but however, there was interest, and there is a very, there's an increase in the interest. And this is when we decided to start our studio, Shift Space, in order to try to bring this vision and these ideas to life. So today we'll be explaining two projects, Slinky Bot, which is our master's thesis, as Sharmeen mentioned earlier, and our first design proposal as Shift Space. Slinky Bot was done with our tutor, Theodore Spiropoulos, and alongside two of our team members, Hambi and Chachin. So Slinky Bot, as Sharmeen mentioned, it's a behavioral, autonomous, self-assembly, and self-aware design system. It aims to provide an alternative approach for living, and we were kind of envisioning the future of homes. And this is why it extends on ideas of ever-evolving and elastic and endless architecture. It was very, very important for us to create a robot which had an emotive aspect and kind of have a life cycle and a learning experience that intertwines with the human experience. And this was our main vision for Slinky Bot. And I wanted to explain first what self-assembly is. Self-assembly is a unit-based, time-based, autonomous system, and it's important that the unit, the singular unit, is mobile and self-organizing. And it's also inspired by a lot of biological and natural and references from nature, such as, for instance, ant intelligence, and how the ant on its own is not a very smart organism, but there's a behavioral and there's a collective intelligence that comes with a group or a collective of ants. And this is one of our main inspirations. Okay, so to simplify things, Slinky Bot is a design system that consists of three scales, We have, first of all, the unit scale, and then we have the behavioral scale where the units start to communicate with each other and then communicate with their surrounding and with the human, which is the most important agent. And then later on, we have the aggregation scale or the big population scale where the units start to create a more complex taxonomies where they can start to communicate with each other as a bigger population. So I'll first start by describing the unit scale. It was very important for us to, first of all, achieve mobility using mechanical systems and changing the direction using these mechanical approaches. We later on thought that it's important to have a dual state kind of robot where for multiple purposes. The dual state allows us, so in the closed state, it provides us with structural integrity, it provides us with fast mobility, but in the open state or the extended state, we can have flexibility, bending, and elasticity, which was very important for those two things to be achieved. So explaining the singular unit, we looked into soft robotics and started exploring using air muscles in order to provide this softness and flexibility. So, and it was very, very important for us to achieve this breathability in order to make because this unit is going to be in direct contact with the human, it was very important for us to kind of achieve the softness element that would make the human comfortable with the robot. So this is why we explored using a lot of different soft materials such as latex, silicone, polyurethane sheets, and all these provided us with different flexibility and different extension ratios and angles. But we later on settled on polyurethane sheets, and as you can see in the diagram, these were some of our tests on exploring how we can use this extension. So to kind of conclude how we designed the singular unit, it was basically made or it consisted of the rigid frame, which is used for mobility, for structural integrity, and the soft air muscles, which is used for purposes of extension and softness. And this also demonstrates like the overall unit as a whole and how it's choreographed to move and to extend. And also there is a little bit of bending within the singular unit. This is also another physical experiment showing how we can create this bending moment. Another thing, so after we've explored with the singular unit, it was important to think about collective communication and how they would communicate with each other as a collective. And this is when we started exploring having a unit that's leading and other units that are following. Another thing was having the units respond to the surrounding, being able to collectively climb and reach the ceiling, for instance, in order to provide other alternatives like bending. And we were basically testing the limits of our system and what it was able to achieve. Also, it was very important for us to look into the collective behavior as an overall, and in order to be able to create functional landscapes that could be later on used to revolutionize the idea of interior design and furniture, and maybe these Slinky Bots would be used in order to kind of create a furniture. So Slinky Bots should be able to detect a human approaching and study the ergonomics of the body and be able to kind of create a comfortable landscape where the human will be able to occupy. It could also be used as a lighting element, and also expecting a human arriving could be used to kind of create the lighting and light up the path for the human. Another thing would be that it would detect the human if there are a multiple or like a population, they would detect a human being there and kind of being choreographed to avoid hitting the human, but at the same time have a playful effect. We studied this in the physical world to be able to demonstrate these ideas and look into how they can choreograph and avoid each other and avoid the human as well. We then translated, and so this is now, I'm talking about our third scale. We then translated these basic rule sets into a communication model where we explored the compact scale versus the extended scale using very basic rule sets. We then later on started looking into different taxonomies to create a library by creating just different boundaries to be able to explore what are the extents of our system in a large population. Later on, we started applying some physical attributes such as gravity by varying the different unit ratio and applying gravity to see how will our system work in larger scale. We then started introducing the human as an agent, and it is the human is the most important agent, using large populations and looking into how we can generate spaces using our model. And we kind of translated it also into the soft world where we're looking into ways that this model would interact with the human and move with the human. And then we started looking into the targeted idea where the units would actually understand where the human is located and then generate landscapes for the human, and then maybe also generate enclosures for the human being. And then later on, they would also be able to move through the ceiling to create also a lighting aspect, and at the same time integrate with the units at the bottom. So it's kind of like they are all communicating with each other. They should also be able to identify the existence of extra human beings and be able to increase the capacity based on the existence of these humans. And then these were just different iterations by just playing with our communication model in order to just create some different iterations of the Slinky Bot. And these were also some of the visualizations of that we generated using this communication model. And lastly, it was very also important to us to kind of have like a sustainable aspect to it. We wanted the Slinky Bots to be able to use solar energy to charge themselves and kind of then later on use this energy. So we had solar panels embedded within these Slinky Bots. Lastly, to conclude Slinky Bot, this was a very brief explanation of it. The whole idea was to kind of shift our notion from architecture being finite and definite to something that's ever evolving. And we were trying just to envision like the future of homes and how we can completely transform architecture using robotics and artificial intelligence and soft robotics, and how they can be together intertwined with the human. So that's basically just a brief about Slinky Bot, and I'm going to leave the floor to Aya to explain our other project. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Jumana. So basically, integrating our background and our computational interests, we quickly wanted to form something that is where we can start applying these research-driven solutions that we are coming up with. So we started off Shift Space Design and Research, which is an experimental design studio positioned at the intersection of architecture, robotics, emergent technologies, and art. And it was important for us that our designs are still influenced by our culture, that they are interactive, have a sustainable aspect to them, but also respond to our current situation and in like the pandemic, for example. The studio's mission is to basically push and revolutionize the architectural and design field to a brighter, more sustainable future from the region to the rest of the world. One of our first design proposals is Plush, which is an attempt towards creating that sustainable future through an interactive design pavilion experience. The design makes use of like generative design tools that are help us basically compromise this overall interior space that is made out of 3 main geodesic domes. The domes are paneled and optimized with static and kinetic panels in strategic locations for purposes of interactivity and also responsiveness. Our design utilizes a sustainable approach to recycling plastic to create an environmentally conscious project. Plush aims to raise awareness to the recycling process and tries to engage the community to be basically a part of the pavilion using their recycled household products. The material testing process that we were exploring is how can we create these panels out of recycled plastic. We went for the material HDPE for its stiffness and durability. We basically took these household products, shredded them, and color sorted them, and then using different color ratios, we were able to heat them and melt them together, and then flatten them using a presser. Each panel and material experiment kind of gave us a unique aesthetic quality and transparency to the panel by differentiating the color ratios and the also mixing methods that we were using. So we were quickly able to create this kind of catalog of these iterations, and it was apparent for us that recycled plastic could have this level of complexity and beauty as well that could add to any project. An important aspect to our project and also one of our studio's design ethos is to basically create architecture that is responsive and participatory. So we've developed a smart kinetic panel system that responds to various scenarios within our pavilion. One of these scenarios are one that is focused on human interaction and play. So with the use of motion sensors, the pavilion would be able to respond to the users passing by, giving them a sneak peek into the activations that's happening within the pavilion, hence inviting them to come in. Another scenario that we wanted to respond to is basically the pandemic, where by the use of camera vision systems inside the pavilion, we would be able to kind of monitor the capacity of the people inside and kind of keep it at a certain limit. And when that capacity exceeds, the panels would be alerted to open up completely to allow for better ventilation within the indoor space and to also act as a warning sign that social distancing and capacity control need to be followed. So this is just a quick kind of overview of this proposal, but the way we see it is that this could be a statement of design and technology and sustainability that's also rooted in our region. And we basically kind of wanted it to be this multifunctional space that allows for different activations to happen inside. And again, to reinforce the ideas of sustainability in a way that it could be beautiful and also adds complexity and design aesthetic to any place. And to just overall wrap up our presentation today, as much as it's challenging to kind of tackle these computational design problems in our region, especially as female Arab computational designers, we strongly believe that there is great potential in shifting the way we approach architecture and design in the region. And this is one of our goals with our new studio, Shift Space, which we will continue to push these boundaries and offer unique, innovative and research-driven solutions. And we see it as being one of our kind of like our edge to merge between our cultural influence and background and the emergent technologies that we're really interested in continuing to exploring and kind of fusing them together to create design and spaces that are responsive, interactive, and most importantly, human-centric. Thank you so much for listening, and please feel free to reach out to us on any of our platforms. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aya and Jumana. It was amazing. I really thank you for sharing your research experience and knowledge. I have many questions for all of you, but in order to organize the questions, I have two kind of approaches to the questions. One particularly related to your research and your presentation. And the other part of questions is for the fact that you are an Arab female computational designer. And this applies to all of you today within our panel. I will start with the research questions, and particularly, I'm going to also follow the same order of presentation. So my first question is for Raja. And Raja, it's basically, I'm really amazed by your line of research and developing computational methods and tools, and which is motivating. And I know that you personally were motivated by how to establish those kind of curriculum kind of courses or pedagogy to enhance the creative process for designers using those computational methods. And I think the way that you mentioned, like you moved from using kind of particular shape grammars, and then you joined McNeil, and then you developed this what you call the intuitive modeling, and how to enhance the creative process for architects. With your background in computer science and background in architecture, I think you managed that really successfully. But it's also very interesting in your presentation. You've drawn this parallel between the designing a program and for general use, like computer scientist perspective, and then designing for architecture and for designers. And you also had this analogy and mentioned that they even in computer science, they use the same terminology: architecture, flow, function, user experience, life maintenance. And then and they use also this feedback loop, and then between their software or their development, and then how users would actually inform and kind of we improve that software. And this parallel between designing architecture and designing tools for architecture is very exciting. And within our digital future sessions, and in the past few sessions also, we've been discussing this aspect of creativity and creative thinking within AI and the new emergent paradigm shift of artificial intelligence. And this model of a human plus machine, and this particular term, I'm borrowing Gary Kasparov's book because I was reading his book recently for a publication, and he uses this model and in his book, where machine intelligence ends and human creativity begins. And within that particular way to look at the use of those computational methods and tools and the new emergent AI strategies, this topic of authorship and agency, and for you as a programmer and researcher and architect, I am really interested in knowing your take and your perspective, this creative thinking and creative process, and how do you find this emergence of AI and kind of prior to that, you were pioneering computational design methods, and the relationship between the machine and the designer. What's the dynamic? What's changing? What's shifting? Are we having an enhanced creative process?
Yeah, thank you, Sharmeen. Just to start, I want to acknowledge the amazing cutting-edge work that the co-panelists have presented, and this is exactly why I set my foot, to start on that line, and that career, and I'm very grateful and very happy to see all that happening. I think in some ways, designing tools or writing software is a bit more liberating design experience than architectural design, because in architectural design you have that really brief, precious time, a month or two, where you actually invest in your creativity and create that building. But then there is the arduous, longer process of making it, building it, and then it's frozen in time, basically, and you move on to the next project. While in software, you actually, it's like a building is still in concept design stage, which is extremely fulfilling, because you keep adding and changing and evolving and growing with it, and sometimes abandoning it and starting a new mode. So to me, the move towards intelligent systems and adaptive architecture is etching us a little bit closer to the experience of developing software itself, from where I'm sitting, where it is changing and evolving and adapting, and it's ever changing. And that interaction is extremely liberating and agile, and afford us the possibility to continue to change and adapt our architectural environment. So I think that will change the relationship between the architect and the building, as opposed to something you produce and then it's there frozen, to something you have to think of it as an organism that evolves over time and change and adapt with its occupants, with its environment. So I'm talking on a more conceptual level here, is that kind of relationship will bring designers even closer to their buildings, because that it will not let go of them in some ways. So that make the designer be more invested in their design and their concept, and be more futuristic in their thinking, and be able to include and allow for that development. The challenge, of course, is that the technical aspect become a bit more complex. So there is the complexity of design knowledge, but also the complexity of technological knowledge, and also available technologies and cost and all the other factors that plays in. But once the community have the critical mass in terms of knowledge and access, and developing the tools and technologies and building technologies to catch up with that process, I think all what we're doing is pioneering or prototyping for the future generation to be able to build on. So this is kind of my take on what's happening with the technological development at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I cannot agree even more. I really support your take, because the more we are advanced and skilled, the more we are skilled with those advanced technological methods, and with the recent AI strategies and development of deep learning methods. I had to learn all of these kind of methods, and then so that I am capable of incorporating them. So for this enhanced creative process that we're talking about. Thank you so much, Raja. Since we have the rest of presenters having this application, and moving from Raja's kind of computational development, and she wrote the software, she wrote the programs and the tools. I'm interested in hearing, for example, Miriam's take with her research that is focused on this materiality exploration, and from the Michigan's research. So for Miriam, my question is that you were working on the CNC knitting, textiles, and pneumatics, programmed slumping, and the overall CNC knitting experiment you showed us. I find this interface between programming and material realization and particularly significant for tackling present and future challenges. Especially we also brought in the presentations this concept of sustainability and resources and material resources. So I think this is part of this kind of a whole discipline or area of automation or robotics, and how do we use them, and what is the future of that discipline. So I also want to know your perspective to this future of automation and fabrication and architecture, and how do you think from your experience those digital design and fabrication methods innovated not only designing and making, but also how we experience the built environment? If you can elaborate on that.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for your questions. So with the current automation technologies, it's mostly used, I would say, for mass production of standardized products and projects, whether in architectural scale or even smaller scale for consumer products. And so I think with the current technologies, either like computation or fabrication, It's making new waves of where the public can actually have a say in some of their products and have the ability to customize, whether it's a clothing item or a shoe or a space or a furniture. And I think the future of automation, I would say, or I would hope for it to be more accessible. And I would say there are a lot of parallels with the history of computing. So I'm kind of extracting this from kind of Neil Gershenfield's concepts within the digital fabrication revolution. So when computers first arrived, like in the early 1900s, they were mainly reserved for just elite institutions and elite individuals, and nobody had access to it. And at the time, there was this question of why would the public need access to computers or laptops? And now in the 21st century, we can't live without them. It's an essential commodity, especially with the pandemic. And I think the same thing would apply to automation and fabrication machines in terms of trying to democratize that kind of access and make it a little bit more accessible, not just to elite institutions or these companies, but as well for individuals in their homes where they can fabricate and make their own products. So I think that is kind of the path that I'm hoping. I'm not sure if it will happen, but it's definitely something that I'm personally working towards.
Very interesting. I really appreciate this kind of way of looking at things. And I'll get back to you with other questions. And I have questions from the chat that are very exciting also, particularly for your research. But I also want to move to Aya and Jumana for also a question on their research. And for Aya and Jumana, you can both answer if you want at any point. But I'll start with the question, which is, like I'm really fascinated by this aspect of your research, which is the behavioral, autonomous, self-aware structures, these soft robots that you're developing and realizing, and we saw the videos, which are very exciting. So the fact that you're embracing this ever-evolving emotive architecture and this intertwined kind of concept of humans and robots or humans and machines. You also mentioned the collective behavior and collective intelligence and communication between robots and humans. And this whole notion or concept reminds me of those current also kind of research ideas happening at the computer science levels. I have a professor from computer science, a friend, who was telling me that they're exploring with these multiple AI, multiple artificial intelligence models that are actually interacting and making decisions together, which is very complex because we're always thinking of one AI doing something, and the fact that it is an AI and there's learning process. So with the machine learning, it's fascinating and it's complex, and multiple AIs is even more complex. But this is what's happening in computer science, and I was interested in your kind of perspective, how do you see elaborating on your research or moving forward? How do you see machine learning and deep learning informing your robots at the local level? Because you have the units and you have the aggregation. And I was really fascinated by that concept and your kind of inspiration from ant colonies and overall this agent-based systems. And how do you think, like, is it like the more intelligent each robot will be, the more intelligent the whole system, the aggregate will be? And how do you see integrating deeper learning, let's say, deep learning and smarter kind of ways or acting those robots with higher levels of intelligence will create this very interesting architecture?
All right. I think early on in our research, we were kind of very inspired by like books and concepts in machinic life, such as The Allure of Machinic Life by John Johnston, and the kind of philosophies behind the new AI, which is basically heavily rooted in multi-agent systems. And basically, like as you were mentioning, it's not necessarily that a singular agent needs to have such a high level of complexity or intelligence, but it's all about the kind of the collective intelligence that comes up from this more bottom-up approach. And that bottom-up approach kind of leads to an emergence of behavior and an emergence of intelligence. So rather than just having a centralized kind of intelligence, it's more distributed, and this kind of allows you that each local agent anyways in our physical world will have some certain types of limitations in functionalities and even in decision making, but that is okay because as a whole system it would be able to perform at a higher level of intelligence and complexity just by its interaction with its other agents. And I think in general in self-assembling systems, it's also it's a key to have a sense of self-awareness, which I think, again, it's a very huge topic and a very complex one to kind of have the agent have the capability and cognition to kind of be aware of what it is, where it is, and the awareness of the agents nearby and in the rest of the system. So of course, like in our project, and given the time frame we had, we were able to kind of tap upon several of these issues on a again, each issue is kind of a whole research on its own. And but yeah, to kind of wrap up, the answer is these ideas of the new AI, it's kind of what we built our foundation of our system on, which is multi-agent, collective complexity, and kind of the communication between the different agents together.
Yes, if I may add, the whole, and this was also the reason why we kind of created those taxonomies, because we had this vision where this robot will be given in the house, and then it would keep growing and keep learning as it kind of starts to look into the surrounding and understand the human behavior, and while creating and also understanding each other, and while creating this overall different taxonomies, they start to have different collective intelligence, and then together they have a different kind of also a different intelligence. So this was the whole initial idea as well.
Thank you so much. So I just also, because I have more questions, but I also want to give the opportunity to our co-moderators. So we have Assistant Professor Nasreen Mansour, and we also have Marina Rodriguez. If you at any point want to ask, you're more than welcome. I know that we also have questions from the chat, but I just wanted to know if Nasreen or Marina have questions, particularly for the presenters. Nasreen, do you want to?
Yes, thank you, Shireen. And thank you to all the panelists for these great presentations. I'm so honored to be here and hear from your work. And Raja, I've used your tutorials before, and I'm so happy and honored to meet you virtually in person. So, so my question has to deal more with the theme of the session, which is female designers from the Arab world. So I crafted a lot of questions. Is how can you, as Arab women in architecture, and especially in this field of computational design, use your expertise to redefine our Arab identity, and especially the way it is perceived by the international audience? And also, how can your design create a bridge between the traditional aesthetics of that we have in the Arab countries, and with the contemporary, and merge it with the contemporary skills and expertise that you have? For instance, I just saw in Miriam's example, you use textile, right? Like the application of textile research to maybe traditional textiles from the Gulf, like tali in the UAE, or sado weaving in Kuwait, as well well as the UAE. So this merging of our identity as Arab female, designers with these contemporary tools that we are using.
I could jump in. The way that I see like computation or digital fabrication is just a means to an end, or like a technique or tool for you to produce something. And I don't really see like a direct connection with heritage or culture. And it's more so like the responsibility of the designer to ensure that. And this is something that I would say somewhat of a concern that I've had because of my education, even though that I've been educated in the UAE, I would say it was a very much Eurocentric type of education. And then moving to the States afterwards, studying in Michigan and then MIT, one of my concerns definitely is when I do go back to Bahrain and practice or even teach, that I would be bringing in these Western ideals or Eurocentric ideas and back home, and it wouldn't be, there would be like some kind of a disconnect with the culture and heritage of the site. And I know that within each country, like post-independence and post-colonialism, every country is trying to achieve some sort of identity, to build the nation's identity. But what's ironic is that they would be hiring all of the foreign, or like, hiring foreign talents in order to design these sensitive heritage and sensitive sites. And so in a lot of ways, it would be somewhat of a projection of what they think the culture and heritage means in that context. And I think because I think most of the panelists have had their education abroad, I think we're kind of within that realm of also bringing in those ideas back home and not being very sensitive to the culture or ways of making. So I think it's super important for us to be working locally and try to unlearn what we have learned abroad and relearn some of the new techniques, or sorry, traditional techniques back at home. Yeah, that would be my take on it.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I feel like this is kind of the challenge that we're facing right now with our new practice that is based here in the region. How do we find these common areas of integration between our culture and our set of skills in computational design? But as Miriam mentioned, the way we approach these tools is, again, they are tools to kind of that don't necessarily have to come with predetermined set of aesthetics or determined design. We can still pull threads of inspiration from our culture and elements from our culture and use them in a computational driven way to create designs that are rooted in the region. So it's challenging, it's tricky, but I feel like it's definitely something that is doable, and I would personally like to see more of it being done in the region.
Yes. Right.
Yeah, no, I mean, if I may just add here one aspect of it, completely agree with the panelists about their take about the use of technology in design. But I'd also like to point out that our region has a very rich history of built environments that has been poorly documented and poorly conserved. And I think one of the opportunities that are offered by the new technology is to be able to do that, to do the full documentation, the 3D scanning, the modeling of our history of our building, of our details, reverse engineering, the crafts and the technologies that enabled that kind of built environment that stand today after thousands of years. So I think it presents an opportunity in that arena where you actually can use technology to be a very cost-effective way to involve the new generation in understanding their methods, their culture. Like, for example, the old city fabric in Baghdad, in any hot region, is really adapted to the weather in a fantastic way. And if you turn turn it into a computer simulated environment, then you can start to learn from these experiences and perhaps start to apply in a new building modes. So I think the opportunities are just immense, and it's up to all of us to be able to extend these bridges and open the collaboration and understanding across cultures, across generations, and be able to benefit rather than compete using these new technologies.
A very interesting point. And here I just have a quick comment slash question is like when Raja, we had previous conversations before the session today, and you mentioned the point that computational design can be a female-friendly discipline, despite the common perspective that computer science is actually, if you look at it, is still a male-dominated discipline. But the fact that I think with the way I see it is that it's empowering, the fact that we have the panelists here with all of these skills and knowledge and experiences in computational design, it can be empowering, and it can be helping in this kind of paradigm shift or change of perception and culture on what women can do. And if you can elaborate more, Raja, on this concept, how do you think computational design can actually empower women, whether in the region and I think globally, and how can this change kind of the socio-cultural aspects in the Arab world, and the fact that it might be easier to be a computational designer than actually a professional architect, maybe.
Yeah, no, I mean, I take an example of my own journey. I'm a mother of 2 kids, and I have been able to build the career that I did without interruption because I've been working from home for 20 years. So simply for women, the ability to have the flexibility to work at any hour of the day and from home if need be for periods of time without jeopardizing their career is a fantastic opportunity for women, I think. And if I was a professional architect, I would no doubt would have had interruptions with the travels, with the different countries that I lived in. It would have been impossible to build a professional career in architecture if it wasn't a computational design kind of career. So that the flexibility and access is a huge thing. The other thing is that computational design can be a bit tedious and need attention to detail and need a great deal of empathy. And I think women are naturally position to be able to do all that. And I feel that a lot of my students who are female, they were most successful with using the tools, innovating, relating it to their built environment, and be able to build really great careers. And I think just circling back to the comment about collaborating or inspiring people in the region, is that a very question of access. I remember, 25 years ago when I was doing my undergraduate thesis and Iraq was under sanctions and I had no resources, there was no internet. I would sit in the center of scientific research for hours in the library trying to find addresses of libraries to send letters by mail to be able to get articles about the research I'm doing, and some respond and some responded saying, you're under sanctions, we can't send you information. So the difference that has happened over 25 years is tremendous. Now, everyone has access to all the research, all the latest research, all the learning material, all the courses. It's all available. So this is really narrowing the gap in terms of knowledge. So for people, and also help them to really bring perhaps their regions into, and especially females, and women, where they have even more limited opportunities. Now they can sit in the comfort of their homes and be able to learn tremendously. And this is a fantastic opportunity, I think, to uplift all women designers.
Yes. Interesting. And I have a question for Aya and Jumana, and then I have another question for Miriam. But I think with that perspective of women empowerment, and then also kind of creating spatial environments that are more inclusive and more equitable, I think your research is particularly tackling that concept with the latest pavilion, and how you're targeting multiple aspects of sustainability, and then a new prototype to architecture. So how do you think computational design can facilitate this kind of change and the creation of those spatial environments that are more equitable, more inclusive? And if you can speak on that.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think a big part of that falls upon us as designers, but also falls upon the systems that we belong to, or the cities that we live in. It's an issue that should be kind of worked on collaboratively, not just from an individual kind of point of view, but also from a systematic kind of point of view. And I think, for example, with our kind of initiative, we've been kind of lucky to have the support of systems around us that kind of facilitate the way for us to express these design technologies in the way that we aspire to. So I think the responsibility kind of falls upon not only the designer, but also having these kind of supporting systems. I'm not sure if Jumana wants to add anything to that, but at least from our experience, this kind of has been the case, that it's important for the individual to kind of aspire for these things and to kind of fight for it and to try to make it happen. But I think a lot of things also falls upon the wider systems around that need to also be supportive of female designers and female designers in the computational and technical and technological field.
Totally agree. I know Marina has a question.
Yes, hello. So nice to be here. I'm really glad to be here and listen to your beautiful presentations of your incredible work. And so I have a question for Jumana. She was just it's related with I don't know if you are familiar with the work of Judith Butler, and she wrote about the force of nonviolence, and she shows how an ethic of nonviolence must be connected with a broader political struggle and social equality. And in a way, I was seeing your presentation that you was talking about the flexibility and the extensions as a property matter and in your work. So my question is, like, if you think that there is like a kind of cultural activism of the softness as a way to understand all the systems, not only the material system, but also the computational system in terms of change and this logic of the bottom-up construction. So, yeah.
Well, that's a very good question. Well, we believe that the softness aspect is very important because generally when we think about robotics and robotics technologies, people would usually freak out and go like they're taking over. And we thought about the soft robotics aspect as something that's very close to the human and something that would kind of resonate with human beings and be responsive, and kind of this breathability aspect as well kind of plays a very important role in accepting the concept of robotics and this emergent technology.
Yeah, I think the way we kind of approached our system early on is this kind of emotive, human-friendly side was very important for us. And as a system that is deployed within already an existing space, we kind of thought about what are the ways that it could enhance the quality of life for the users living by. How can it intertwine with their lives, as in, for example, as a family grows bigger and more individuals are there, how can the system also expand and kind of offer them more space in a sense? So yeah, I think these are things we kind of also thought about early on, and to kind of try to remove the stigma of like, you know, like living, for example, with a robotic system. It's kind of a scary, you know, dark thing. The way we kind of saw it is, you know, imagine it as kind of having your pets around, basically, that you're interacting with, and they're, in a way, they're kind of enhancing your quality of life and assisting you, for example, in many ways. And just to like add to that, I think I can't recall right now the research, but there was a lot of research done in terms of these kind of robotic systems to be used as assistive methods for people that require, or the people that have certain kind of mobility issues or disabilities, and how these systems can be something as an assistive layer to their homes, and how to make it basically more, how to make their life more independent without requiring, for example, another person to take care of them, but rather have this kind of assistive system that lives with them. So there's many applications, I feel, that could kind of be utilized with these systems.
Yeah, also, yeah, adding to that, like I believe now more than ever, like for example, with the pandemic, where, for instance, limited interaction with human beings is required, we can kind of utilize such robots in order to be able to kind of be companions, or even perform some of the like activities that's required for medical care, for instance. So yeah, I think that integrating it with a human would be something very, very interesting and hopefully exciting.
That's a great point. And with Jumana's kind of feedback, I also want to go back to Miriam, because I want to have receive questions from the chat. And we have Gustavo, who asked a great question. He wants to know or to hear about the vision of how the process of pre and post pandemic have impacted research. And I think I'm thinking particularly of Miriam, because she mentioned that, and also hear about the potential of these new methodologies that you're researching, and how they're traversing and how they can impact both academia and industry.
Yeah, for sure. At the moment, maybe I'll answer the second question first. For the CNC knitting project, obviously, this is something that I'd not gotten into in the presentation, but the main aim as well is to minimize the amount of formwork that is needed when you're casting concrete. And the aim is also to minimize the carbon footprint. So when you're thinking about shipping of precast concrete into the site, obviously there's a lot of cost that goes into it and a lot of carbon footprint that is left because of that. And so with the textiles, it kind of allows you for an opportunity to ship such products, and they're super light, minimizing the carbon footprint, and you could cast it in place. And I would refer, like one of the greatest examples of that would be the Knit Candela, where they knitted all of the textiles at ETH, and then for the Acadia conference in Mexico, they came in literally with just a backpack of the textiles, and they suspended everything and cast it in place, and it wasn't costly at all. So part of the interest of that research is within that scope of sustainability and minimizing carbon dioxide emissions within an architectural scope. And for the first question, again, I may be like reiterating about like what is the future of digital fabrication. But again, I think it all has to do with accessibility and making sure that the public has access to these kind of tools and techniques. And I think what's very beautiful with that is that it gives you a sense of empowerment. And I'm sure this is something that everybody else feels the same way, is once you get accustomed with a certain tool, or you know how to make something, you feel much more confident, and you feel empowered that you can pretty much do anything, even though it's something that terrifies you at the beginning and you have absolutely no concept about it or no knowledge about it. But it's simply gaining that kind of knowledge and skill set empowers you, whether you're a female or male, to pursue that kind of field. I would say that, yeah, that would be my take on it.
Great answer. Yeah, but you're very kind of thoughtful and very wise when you answer. I like the way you approach things. You're very young to do that. Now, I also have like more a general question for all the panelists on the like if you can extrapolate and kind of elaborate on computational methods potential to change the way we actually build or inhabit our world for hopefully a more resilient, more sustainable. And I know with Aya and Jumana, we already saw their kind of vision to that and their aspect of incorporating recycled materials. But I think in a like we have more like the challenges that we're talking about with the fact that we're all female computational designers in certain conditions and certain environments. But then I think we have all more common challenges as human beings with the environmental challenges, and we saw the pandemic and how it impacted our lives. And I was wondering, since all of your research and all of the panels today have really made an impact, and the research was towards building methodologies or tools with Raja, or whether applying those methods into kind of new experiences, new architecture, new or kind of enhanced experience, enhanced built environments where we're targeting multiple objectives, including sustainability and resiliency. So maybe we start with Raja taking the question is how do you see your methods or research or tools that you develop are actually changing the way that architecture is actually built or inhabited in terms of resiliency and sustainability?
That's actually a very humbling question, because I don't think they do. It's really what you do with it is what make it special. It's not the tool itself. But I think we go back to one basic principle is inclusion. The more people are included and have access to be able to be part of that new technology and new wave and new thinking, the better off all of us. So, I mean, one of the things that worry me is that it will become more exclusive with time, you know, with the complexity of technology and new methods and the need for collaboration in order to do anything. There will be temptation to cut the access that we have right now, the openness of being able to contribute, to write your own tools, to use whatever platform, to access whatever region, you know, that global mode of collaboration and access and exchanging knowledge and exchanging technologies and expertise is wonderful. We have a concept in software engineering, which is modular design. So you can write modules that does certain function, and by connecting all the modules together, you really can achieve a really advanced software. So if you know, architects are individualist and they really like to you know, bring their ideas and names and contributions to the fore. And in technology, I think the collaboration, the connection, the modular design, the access and the openness become key concepts for any successful implementation of technology. Otherwise, we will be held back. So I guess you know, the future, if I look at it, the more open it is, the more inclusive, the better off we're all going to be. So that's really my take here.
How about Aya and Jumana? Do you have something to add on that?
Yes. So, okay, I believe that the role of architecture and computational design in general is very strong, because like just like everything, we have autonomous cars, we have technology, but for some reason architecture is not progressing as fast as these other technologies. And I believe that we can use computational design for a lot of solutions, for a lot of sustainability aspects, for a lot of cultural references, and as Dr. Raja has mentioned before, for analysis even of history, and so I believe that computational design will have a very strong role. It's just that utilizing it and kind of what can we say, like appreciating it is what's like we still need to work on that, and that's I believe that's the issue here.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Jumana and Raja have mentioned. I echo everything. And there's something that I may add. I think there needs to be kind of a remodeling of what architectural education is. Because right now, I would say with all of the panelists, like for example, Raja is a great example. She moved on from being an architect and to studying computer science to becoming a software developer at McNeil. And with Jumana and Aya, they're applying, engineering within their projects, as well as computer science. And this is something that I'm also trying to pursue. And I think the reason was that it was missing within my architectural education. And there's kind of this like interest within computer science and material science and artificial intelligence, which is not integrated as much within, I would say, the majority of undergraduate schools across the world, not even in the region, but generally. And this is something that I have come across to and also appreciated with MIT's undergraduate program for the architecture, in which they're really focusing on bringing this new wave of designers who are truly multidisciplinary. So you have both somebody who's saying computer science and architecture and material science at the same time, or mechanical engineering, and so on and so forth. And I think those kind of individuals have so much to offer, as opposed to somebody who was just traditionally trained as an architect. And I would say one of the greatest examples as well would be people like Philip Block, who studied structural engineering and then also architecture, or Skylar Tibbetts, computer science and architecture, or Neri Oxman, biology and architecture. I think it's when you're coupling these two fields together, that's when there's a lot of promise and I think a lot of value in what you can contribute, as opposed to focusing into a singular field and not venturing out. And I think that's what's missing within the architectural pedagogy.
Totally agree that I think the fact that architecture is already an interdisciplinary kind of field, and I think we're a little bit behind, and I agree with Miriam, the fact that we need to catch up and somehow with the, but I also see this promising kind of wave, and especially the fact that even this platform, this digital future sessions, and the fact that we are sharing knowledge globally, and we have like the past, for example, session was on AI and deep green, and all of the technologies and strategies and AI solutions are incorporated into design, and the fact that we are aware of there is research happening in Barcelona or other places around the world, and then I think it's promising. I think the landscape or the ecology of architectural education and knowledge is shifting towards more interdisciplinary approaches. But I agree with Miriam that we're still kind of behind in certain aspects. I have to go back to the question on the fact that how do you perceive your role as a female computational designer in the Arab world? And I know that we discussed with Miriam that she probably would go back to her country and do something, make change, make this kind of great positive change. And I don't know if we want to take it starting from Raja, because Raja is making the change from San Diego, California. So how do you see the perspective of, or the kind of how is your perspective or the vision for the actual change in the role of female architects, first, and then computational designers, which are actually less, let's say, professionals with computational skills, is changing culturally, and it's changing the built environment in the Arab world.
Right. I don't know if it's the same with other schools, but at the School of Architecture in Baghdad University, we were 50% females, 50% males. So it's one of the professions that really attract females because the social sensitivity and the understanding of the human element in design is very central to architecture. It combines art, it's combined family, function, people, but also building and technology and all that different aspects. So a lot of people aspire to be in that profession, and it's sought by the most intelligent people in the region as well. So, and great thinkers by nature, and I think that's a good start. And if people start to harness and encourage that interest in architecture among female or others, then I think that will be, wonderful. Again, it all comes down to access and collaboration, and I think this will afford people to have more opportunities to be able to change things and move forward and be connected with the rest of the world and be able to have their own flavor of how to do things. I mean, admittedly, I've been out of the region for 25 years, so I can't claim to know enough about what's going on exactly right now in the schools, in the profession in general, and how has it changed over the 25 years. I think one of the main things that we can do is first to acknowledge the realities on the ground, not walk away from it. This is what we have. These are the things that we can change and improve. And these are the resources we need, and reach out and collaborate. And then from there, people will start to see results. That's probably the best thing I can say at the moment. But I think the people who actually practice there, still study there and contribute to architecture, preserving architecture and educating the new generation might know better. And I think to give them voices through such conferences where you can invite people who are from the region, have been there throughout all the past decades, might have new insights to all of us as to how we can all be able to kind of help or collaborate or direct or guide or change our behavior in a way that could serve them. So that would be really what I would suggest.
And just to add on that, because I know that I was reading through like the feminist waves and the actual fact that not just in the Arab world, I think globally we have still the issue of inequality in terms of recognizing architects, female architects. And I think historically we know the stories of Denise Scott White and important architects who are somehow marginalized or overlooked. And now we came to know them more. And the fact that in the Arab world we have different also circumstances, and that's why I think I want to also ask Miriam, how do you see, like with your degree from MIT, going back to your country, how do you see the challenges, and how do you think you can overcome those challenges?
That's a good question. I can't really predict what challenges I'd be facing, because I think in the context of Bahrain, in terms of like female designers or like just females in general, I don't think there's any kind of discrimination. If you come in and you have an idea and your idea sounds great or the proposal sounds great, I think everybody's going to be on board to support you. But I would think one thing that I find might be a little bit of an issue is that there is oftentimes more trust for individuals who do study abroad and come back in versus individuals who just study locally. And I think the issue here is potentially like being able to finance your education or being able to attain some kind of scholarship or sponsorship to, you know, acquire education or practice abroad and then come in to, you know, to build in your credentials. So I think for me, like one of the biggest issues is just acknowledging that kind of difference and trying to minimize it and I think it also starts with education, because I know in Dubai, I think education, the architectural education is great and it's doing amazing and fantastic. But in Bahrain in particular, I know that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and especially within the architecture department. So I think it's part of our responsibility, like once we go back, to kind of try to change or shift the architectural pedagogy and make sure we're evening out the playing field and making sure that everybody knows about what's out there, what are the sources that are out there, and how they can potentially also fund or acquire support, whether it's through fellowships or governmental sponsorships or through universities.
Thank you so much. And I know that moving to Aya and Jumana, the situation is already happening. You just started your office, your research and design office. And I would like to hear your kind of, how do you find yourself navigating through architecture discipline and in professional kind of realm?
Firstly, I'd just like to kind of reflect on like the fact that when we were studying our undergrad in Egypt at the, for example, American University in Cairo, and I think even the AUS in Sharjah is also similar, you would find more than 75% of the class, for example, is female. And then, for example, in the case of Egypt, when you look at all the kind of ongoing successful studios, you would find them all male dominated. So you kind of wonder, like, what is happening there? Like, where is this kind of gap that is kind of not met? And these are kind of issues that we are kind of consciously, continuously thinking about, because it's a multi-layered kind of issue. Again, in the case of Egypt, there is a huge difference between the kind of support and the opportunities available for female designers compared to male ones. Now, in terms of our experience of opening up here in Dubai, it's kind of similar to the situation where Miriam is explaining, where it's like, there is more of a kind of an equal playing field as long as you have good innovative ideas. But again, there is this huge value of what are the knowledge and skills and expertise that you're bringing in from abroad to the region. And in many ways, if we did not have this kind of graduate studies from abroad in our, you know, CVs and stuff, it would have been otherwise very difficult to kind of make any kind of statement or really just have our voices heard, basically. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if Jumana wants to add.
Yes, I agree. I believe that with computation, and a lot of it is unfortunately in the Arab world, a lot of people are still unfamiliar with the concept of computational design, and people are still using old methods and techniques in design. And I think it's our role to kind of educate people through our projects and examples. And I believe this is the role of academia, and to get into academia and get into workshops and kind of have our research available online for people to be able to understand and see. Because, for example, unfortunately, when I was an undergrad, I didn't have much of exposure to computational design aspects. And when I got into it and understood it further, it kind of added a lot to my interest and a lot to my values. So yeah, I believe that unfortunately, a lot of people are still uncomfortable with the concept of computational design. And this is the challenge to us, because we kind of have to go an extra mile to kind of explain that, yeah, it's you're creating something new, you're creating something different. It's not just a typical building. It's there are a lot of aspects that need to be taken into consideration, and I think that's the main challenge. And then coming from a female, it becomes even a lot more challenging. But I believe in the UAE, there's a bit more of a platform where you can express yourself more. And if you have an innovative idea, people tend to listen and understand and kind of support you on it.
Very interesting. Now, I would like to be positive, and I would like to say that I think things are getting better in that region and globally. Hopefully, we see kind of the change in society and perception to like women are capable. The fact that women are capable of everything, and this kind of inequality is I think is being kind of is decreasing somehow. And I like to say that I'm really happy that we had you today, because this is kind of like a celebration of all of your achievements. And this is showing to the world that we have such talents and such kind of research expertise and knowledge from very young, let's say, compared to me, actually, you're very young, doing your kind of master's degrees or just finished your master's degree. And I see that the fact that you're going back to that area, to that region, and then bringing change, making positive change is really promising. I would like to say that I'm almost done with my questions, and I would want to see if Marina and Nasreen have more questions.
Thank you, Sharmeen. I just wanted to add that I agree with what you said, and I thank all the panelists for their input. Especially, I've been also away. I'm from Tunisia, and I've been away from my country also for a while, like Sharmeen, and I've done all my studies in the U.S. So it's hard for me to know what's happening back home. However, I have friends who are teaching in the Middle East, who are teaching also in North Africa, and I hear from them that there is this initiative of having these workshops, for instance, like in integrating computational design into academia. But again, it's a matter of resources, as Raja was stating, and unfortunately the resources are still limited. Although we have access, I mean, in the US, we feel like we have access to everything. When I talk about that in comparison with my peers in the Middle East, I feel like there is still missing access to kind of resources that need for them to thrive in this field. The other question I will probably add, Gustavo mentioned it in the chat, and thank you, Gustavo, for all the questions that I copied all of them in a Word document so I can filter through them. But one was, I think, important is, what is, according to all of you, what is the role of the humanities, like philosophy, theory, to help you speculate and visualize the future of this field, of the architectural field? Because this is something that we also, I mean, in addition to the technology and the knowledge of the science and the tool itself, there is also a background in philosophy and theory that has to be integrated into this field. So I want to take or have your intake or your input on this combination or collaboration between the humanities and the technology.
Yeah, no, I'd like to jump in here, because I think what I did, I mean, I recognize the central role that philosophy and theory plays into architectural education, but more so into computational design. And that might sound strange, but the course, the program that I put together, one important element was theory, and having the students study the history of how technology was incorporated in architecture, how computational design started, how it evolved, and have them add a perspective and context to and ask the question, why? You know, I mean, technology tell us how to do things, and we can do wonderful things, and we can go in a million different directions. But why do we do it, and when do we do it, and in what context? Only theory and philosophy and understanding the history of how things came about, what things worked, what didn't, how did it influence, positive, negative. Be very critical to everything you do, every technology you use. Question it, interrogate it, change it. evolve it, you know, and be an active participant rather than passive user of the technology is the only way to make a real difference, in my opinion. So it's very important. It's a front and center in the and go hand in hand with the study of technology, in my opinion.
Yes, I have to agree. I believe that actually computational design has a very human-centric role in its essence, because the idea is, at the end of the day, we're kind of catering for the human, and everything, it's a behavioral approach, it's a bottom-up approach, where the computational design should actually facilitate facilitate life, make life easier for the human rather than just create spaces. So in essence, like, and I believe that this is like the ultimate goal, where you would create completely an environment which completely caters for your every need. And I believe that using computational design, you can kind of reach that. And this is the research that, and this is why we do the research that we do, is because we want to try and cater for the human and integrate the architecture, blur the lines between this rigid architecture and the human, and want the architecture and the human to actually intertwine and have like a collective life. So yeah, this is my take on that.
Yeah, I think as architects in general, we tend to wear different hats. And I feel like in a way we kind of unconsciously, you know, tend to go into our like historian state or a philosopher state. Like, I think even in our education, we were kind of taught early on to kind of look at design and the process in a multifaceted kind of way and from different angles. So I feel like we're all kind of naturally trained to become these kind of different individuals as we kind of design. And I think it's important. It's very important for architects to be very well connected to history and philosophy as well as technology. I think it's one of these professions, especially nowadays, and especially moving with computational design. It's kind of this space where everything, you know, feeds into this kind of melting pot, and it just becomes, you know, how can you coordinate yourself and how can you be well aware of these different aspects at the same time to kind of make more well-informed, well-rounded decisions. Yeah, that's my take.
I agree. And just to add one quick comment, I was just talking with my colleague, Daniel Bolojan, who is also very active into AI research. And he's one of the actually great researchers in AI. And we were talking about the fact that when we talk about AI and bias and ethics and other issues with what we're doing, like the robots that we're building and the programming, I think the concept is about like, we are actually bringing our bias and we're reflecting in the way we program those technologies, right? I think if we are biased, the AI will be biased, right? And the fact that we have to make sure that we're actually developing all of these research kind of areas in a way that we're serving humans and we're serving kind of the ecology and maintaining kind of life, sustaining life on Earth, because with all of the environmental challenges. So I think the fact that we need the aspect of the humanities to kind of to be reminded that our aim is not kind of economy or other aspects that are driven, like driving technology is actually, as architects, we have this big role in serving humans. And I totally agree with all of the comments from Jumana and Aya that we should be reminded and not tempted to kind of just to design for the sake of certain aspects or objectives, but also to serve humans in the first place and also to maintain life on Earth. So thank you so much. I would like to ask if you have any final kind of remark from our co-moderators or our panelists. Closing statement, if you want.
Well, I just want to thank you for offering this opportunity to and giving a voice to a number of people from a certain region that is underrepresented and under celebrated, I guess. And I hope in the future we'll have more, keep having more diversity, because I think the only way to combat bias is diversity. When you have multiple voices, multiple opinions, and you know, the future is owned by you, by all of us, and it's up to us to shape it in the way that we want it to be. And I have to add one last thing, that women in general are naturally multitaskers, and they are grounded in reality, and they can bring a lot of balance into applying technology to our design environments. And I think their voices are essential and central to keep us all grounded into a future that is better and brighter for the whole communities, rather than only iconic, I guess. With that, I think I really appreciate you, you know, giving voice to all of us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil Leach. Thank you, Digital Futures team.
Yeah, maybe I can just say something at the end. I mean, thank you. First of all, thank you. This was a wonderful session. Beautiful work, and it's really great to be able to use this platform to give voice to such talented designers. I guess I just want to say something from the perspective of kind of from the West, in that sense, is that, I mean, the Arab world, of course, is not at all a homogeneous entity at all. There are many different sort of countries there, but we have to be aware that in some countries in the Arab world, women can't even drive. I mean, we're talking about women in technology. We're in a situation where women cannot drive, and that is astonishing to me. We're also, you know, I'm more familiar maybe with Iran, which is not an Arab country, but it's in the region. You know, I'm struck by the fact the women have to wear veils or they hijab in other countries, and this is astonishing. And of course, men will say that this is to respect women, to protect women, but you know, it's men who are telling them to wear this. And I think this is a really important thing to think about. I was struck. I remember I did an interview with Homa Fajadi a while back for her book that she produced, and what I was struck by was I'd come across all these incredibly powerful women from the region, from West Asia. I don't like to call it Middle East, but West Asia, and including, of course, Zaha. She was absolutely a powerhouse, amazing. And when I was at the GSD, I had an office next door to Fashid Masawi, who's also a really strong woman. And my question was, well, how is it that it produces a region that is so patriarchal, and nonetheless produces all these strong, powerful women? And she said, well, it's precisely because it's patriarchal. Precisely it's because it's patriarchal, we have to be strong to do that. And I think what we've seen above all today is, you know, I think it's wrong to say, well, who's the next Zaha? But I think it's really important to say, well, who are role models for women in the region? Because it's absolutely true that education is more than 50%, I would say, female now, and most of the best students are female. So you need to have role models, especially you need to have role models in Arab countries, especially, and other countries from that region. So, you know, I think we've seen something astonishing today, which is really a beautiful and soft but powerful demonstration of abilities. And I also appreciate the fact that as a theorist that the idea that theory should also be part of it. And I think the theory is really about questioning things. It's not about the manifesto. It's about questioning things, and we should use it as a tool to interrogate and challenge the status quo. And I think also through practice too. And I think gradually you are, in your operations, are beginning to sort of open things up and change things, I hope, in the region. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of like maybe, I don't think any other further comments, but just maybe to finish up, and I want to sort of say something to introduce Marina, who is going to be chairing the next session, another incredibly strong and powerful woman who's kind of giving a voice in a different community, the Latin American community. But I think that's kind of important. I want to just kind of quickly, if I may, just share my screen and then introduce Marina to say something. And I wanted to start by saying that actually tomorrow we have a theory session, since you're talking about theorists, including Sumin Ham, who was another figure who I know taught two of you at the ADRL, an incredibly talented individual who will be talking about swarms, which of course again relates to the whole discussion about multi-unit systems, emergence, and so on tomorrow. And just to say that those who have been following on the Sunday, which is a doctoral platform, we're trying to make it universal. We're also changing the time. So whereas normally we start at 9 o'clock, it's 10 o'clock. And maybe if you want to get a screen capture of this, that's there. It's also the information about this is in the Digital Futures website. And just to kind of remind you that next week, when we're kind of, because of the change in the US time, but in the States itself, we will be starting at 10 o'clock in the EST, or 7 o'clock in Pacific Standard Time, a different time, but will remain exactly the same times in Europe and China. So I wanted to just leave a little bit of space for Marina to just say a few words, since she's with us, about next week's session. Marina.
Yes, thanks, Neil. Thanks. Yes, first of all, I want to, like, in a way, to build a bridge between today presentations and the presentation that will continue next Saturday that I'm moderating. And I believe that that was my question about this kind of cultural activism in terms of softness. I mean, if softness can be a cultural activism, and in a way, it's also answering several questions that we were thinking today in terms of this capacity of the softness that Jumana was mentioning in terms of flexibility and extension is part of what we are doing here in terms of that we are in a way hacking the traditions, hacking the education in terms to make it more democratic or open and free for everyone. And also we are recoding our professions. So there is not like the same boundaries, at least, or the boundaries are more flexible in terms of professions, no? And we are in a way building who we are in the not only as architects, but also in terms of how this boundary between disciplines are not the same that we built during the 19th century, for example, and they are still following. In a way, I believe that today we can see that we architects, for example, if we can still name it or identifying as architects, in a way, we are exploring new kind of spaces. And sometimes we find ourselves building this kind of mental spaces, or this kind of new structures that we are building, like DigitalFUTURES, for example, which is finally a kind of architectural structure in terms of what we are proposing here. So in a way, I believe that all these categories, we are hacking these categories or recoding these categories, also in terms of binarism, for example, where it's like, in a way, you don't born, at least I'm following this, Judith Butler thought that we didn't born a woman, we became a woman, no? We became a woman, we built our identity, and we cannot like continue following these political fictions in terms of defining things through these categories. Or at least if we create the category, automatically we have to question the category as a next step. So this is my final thought, in a way, to build this bridge between what we were speaking today and what we are going to see next Saturday. And we have this magnificent guest next Saturday. It's a super provocative title, with the death of culture. And we invited Daniel Cardoso-Lage. Okay, Sanford Quinter will be there too. Sylvia Lavin, Neil Leach, which is here, and Ciro Nagle and Enrique Walker is going to be with us. So we invited all of you to participate and to be here at 10 Eastern time, 10 p.m. in China. And in a way, one of the things that we are going to discuss is that what is culture, if can everything be culture? And then we are following this kind of tradition of the death of everything. We speak about the death of architect, we speak about the death of history, the death of theory. So in a way, it's like, how can we bring all this thought together? And I have like a short brief about the event that the culture, elusive, mixed and unique, promotes new projects. And architecture as a kind of a cultural process is an invitation to all to project discipline and to connect them in a network in which they exceed their limits. So overflow them, imagine a new kind of limit, like magic fields that can let us run free. Thank you, and I expect to have all of you again next Saturday to share this space with us. So.
Thank you so
much. The death
of
patriarchy maybe as well.
The death of patriarchy, exactly. The rise of the feminist wave. Thank you so much. I know that, I don't know if you want, Aya, Jumana, Miriam, if you have very last statement to close the session.
Yeah, I would just like to thank everyone for this space to be heard. We truly appreciate it, all of us, and it's been an absolute pleasure to kind of see all of these ideas that are happening and check out everyone's research and work. Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for organizing this and giving us the time and space for it. So thank you.
Yes, I agree with Aya. It was a pleasure to present today among all of you, and actually the work that you've presented was inspiring, and the conversation and the discussion was very, very fruitful. And yeah, we're very happy to be with you, and thank you for organizing it. Thank you for giving us the platform. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I would just echo what everybody said, and maybe if I can add one more thing. I think there are a lot more females that we can potentially highlight and continue the conversation. There are a whole bunch of Arab females here at Harvard and at MIT and Cambridge, and who are doing absolutely incredible work. And I think that should be highlighted as well. So hopefully in future sessions.
I totally agree. I think we should have more local voices, more female Arab designers sessions. And this is just the beginning. But thanks again to Neil, and thanks to the Digital Futures team. And I have to say that I'm thankful also and I'm humbled and honored to moderate this session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye. See you next Saturday.
Thank you. Bye.